biggest or most interesting headlines in the Christian world for the week and dissect them just a little bit. I'm James, the Terrestrial Pilgrim. Let's jump right in. All right, so this first article is about a very popular podcast, which is funny because Joe Rogan, you might know of the Joe Rogan podcast experience. I think is what it's called. I know it's what it's called. Funny because I'm one of the ones who knew him to be the Fear Factor guy before the podcast. I'm not even sure I knew that he was a comedian, but anyway, to the article. So I thought this one was interesting just because of the correlation that he makes as far as this statement goes. So he was talking with Matthew McConaughey, or however you say his name, the actor, Matthew McConaughey, whatever it is. And so I guess they got on some religious topic. So we'll read some of this, but the headline says Joe Rogan compares enforcing the Ten Commandments to Sharia law. If you're not familiar with Sharia law, actually let's look at what Sharia law actually is. That should help you get an understanding of what it is, and then we'll kind of look more into the article to see if it is a justifiable correlation. For him to say that again, enforcing the Ten Commandments will be akin to how in Islam they enforce Sharia law. But let's look at what Sharia law is and see if once we go through this article, that's actually a fair comparison to make, and then we'll break it down a little bit. So this is what Sharia law is. Sharia refers to the religious principles, ethical code, and legal framework of Islam. Starts off sounding like, okay, if that's what you believe, derived from the Quran and Sunnah, to guide Muslims in all aspects of life, including worship, ethics, and social matters. It classifies actions into 5 categories. Now here it starts to get interesting. And remember, this isn't even really talking about Sharia law. This is talking about a comparison between Sharia law and the Ten Commandments. So here are the 5 categories: obligatory, recommended, permitted, discouraged, and forbidden. So while the application and interpretation of Sharia vary significantly, with some countries using it for family or personal status laws and others for criminal law, its implementation is also a subject of debate, mostly in Western countries, as it obviously would be, as we are Muslim, so we don't really feel that, the Western countries aren't Muslim by law. But here's another interesting part before we get to the article about Sharia law and just some ways that Sharia law is used throughout Muslim countries. And remember the comparison here, 10 Commandments. So Sharia law conflicts with international human rights standards through its application of harsh punishments like flogging and amputation, lack of due process, discrimination against women, and of course, religious minorities, of course, women too, and suppression of free expression and association. Specific issues include harsh punishments, or just say punishment. Let's not judge, even though you'll see why they say harsh, such as stoning, amputation, and flogging, which of course in most of the rest of the world, or some, I don't even know how much, would constitute torture and cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. They have Sharia law. We have discriminatory practices against women, male guardianship system, things like that, and of course, under Sharia law, religious minorities do not have freedom of speech, expression, and it says also or neither freedom of expression or freedom of, let me see what I've said, assembly is what I was looking for. That's what I was going to say. So let's get back to the article, because this is what Joe Rogan likened the 10 Commandments to. You don't even really need to know the 10 Commandments because most of us know the gist of the 10 Commandments. So let's see how the conversation got to this point with him and Matthew McConaughey. So as a Texas law mandating the display of the 10 Commandments in public school faces an uncertain legal future. So now I don't want to go too much into the law, just the comment, but that is an interesting law. Okay, so that there's a Texas law. Of course, that's in trouble. Obviously, it would be for having a mandate that the Ten Commandments should be displayed in schools. Now, the interesting thing already about mandates is it doesn't make it something that's in practice. So already there's a difference between this mandate and Sharia law, because this mandate just means you have to display it. So it doesn't mean the kids come to school and they got to rub it, like some football teams come on the field and rub their whatever thing they idolize. I don't even know, but good luck charm. But yeah, this isn't even something that they have to recite or anything. It's just there, displayed, which is a topic unto itself, because you could almost say, is there any worth in displaying God's words if it's not used? It's no different from the Bible, the family Bible that sits in a display case but it's never used. Well, what's the point of it? Of course, you have other Bibles, but just as an example, it's not a good luck charm. There are no charms in the Christian faith. So just to have it there, nothing's been implemented. It's just there. And I guess you could say the opportunity is there for a kid to come up to it and read it. But you kind of see that was kind of Matthew McConaughey's point, is that it's a good foundation, is how the conversation got started. So shout out to Matthew McConaughey for, trying, I guess, to defend the Bible somewhat. But on the surface already, we could say just the law itself is nothing like Sharia law, because they're not saying an implementation of it. They're just saying that they want to display it in all schools. I get the backlash too, because if there is religious freedom, separation of church and state, whatever those things mean, if there is that, then you could say, okay, well, if you want this Christian, Judeo-Christian thing portrayed in schools, well, you got to do it for this religion, this one, and this one. Now we do have a problem, but anyway, that's not even the point. Let's go to how the conversation with them went, and then we'll get to the point. So I'm going to read some of how this conversation went. So this is Matthew McConaughey talking. He says, with all of that exterior stimulus, and here we are with adult minds and even talking about it, man, imagine a child, he said. Does anyone have a better suggestion than the Ten Commandments to get a child's mind going? So here you can kind of see he's sort of passive aggressively saying he thinks it's a good thing, which I think is interesting, because he's not really like out there, like, yeah, God is kind of really, trying to make it conversational, so he goes on, oh, just those 10 things. If you look at that and aim in that direction, I feel like you can't go wrong. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's so much more to it than that, and the Ten Commandments can't save you, but there's no salvation found in the Ten Commandments. But as far as life goes, it is a really great foundational first 10 commandments. I mean, to me, it's one of the evidences that it does come from God, because it's just so, it makes sense. I mean, as far as just, okay, give me 10 basic rules for life, you got only 10. It actually is really, really good, but we'll talk more about that. Let's keep reading. So now let me see, I think Rogan starts to speak. This is him now. So if I was going to put it in a school where there are non-religious people, there's a bunch of stuff in there, like, he says a bunch, he names the one, or maybe two, not taking the Lord's name in vain, not having other gods before me, where that would give people pause. He's right. I mean, would give people pause. They'd be like, wait a minute, what are you telling me? I can't take the Lord's name in vain. Like saying, gee, a bunch of lines, I think we know what that is. If that's taking the Lord's name in vain, people do it all the time. So then they're speaking some more about it. Let me see. Okay, so Matthew McConaughey likens it to burning of the flag of America. Okay, so Rogan says, imagine you get arrested for taking the Lord's name in vain. So it's interesting because he jumps to that, but nobody's even talking about, but this is how he likens it to Sharia law. Let me finish his comment. He compared the enforcement of what he called Christian law to the implementation of Sharia law, which of course is the body I just read to you of religious laws that forms the Islamic tradition. Let me see. And if you put something like that in, like now, what are you going to do? You're going to enforce it? There's a lot to talk of that, he says. Let me see. So, yeah, so that's the basis of the thought process. And again, because, I mean, it's a podcast, they're just being conversational, because it's not even really talking about implementing it as much as it's simply talking about, just that it be there. I mean, that's what the law is about. That's what the conversation is about. But because they're just having a conversation, it's like, imagine trying to implement something like that, something like the Ten Commandments, and you got to remember where we started from, the idea that this is like Sharia law, considering what Sharia law is. That's the part you need to remember, how that's enforced. compared to what the Ten Commandments actually are. Now, one thing he could have done, you can go to the Levitical law and say the Levitical law was much harsher because of what its purpose was. But at the same time, this isn't what that's about. This is a comparison between the Ten Commandments and actual Sharia law, which pretty much rules the lives of Muslims in Muslim dominated countries with a very strict hand. And if you don't adhere to these laws, there are very strict punishments. Also, you compare it to the Ten Commandments, where there are no punishments. Even if America or Texas said we're going to, not only will it be displayed in schools, it must be followed. Well, there are already laws for most of these things. Stealing, killing. I mean, they're mostly laws already for the Ten Commandments. There may not be a law against lying, or there may not anymore be laws against, committing adultery. But maybe there still are. I don't know. I know there were at one point. But coveting your neighbor's wife, things like that. But yeah, you can't, some of those things you can't even enforce, because how do I know if you're coveting something? Because that's something that's taking place in your heart. But the basis for the Ten Commandments are things that are already followed, because they're basic laws that make basic sense. Okay, I mean, they're pretty much laws that make basic sense. And the whole point of them, which is why they are so strong, the strength of the Ten Commandments is God teaching people how to live with him and with each other. And that's the part where, so Joe Rogan took offense to the first one, not taking God's name in vain, even though he kind of doesn't know what it is, because he's talking about saying cuss words pretty much, I guess. And he thinks that's, like people say, oh my God, things like that. Is that taking God's name in vain? Well, it's deeper than that. I'll probably do another video about just what it really means to do that, because I know that's what a lot of people think, is that it's just saying the term God and not meaning it, which is what that thought process would be. But obviously it's deeper than that, because yeah, like I said, I would have to go into to really explain what it's really about. But it's deeper than just when somebody says, oh my God, it's a bad habit. But it's so much deeper than that. But yeah, so he's looking at it from an implementation point of view, where really the law is about just displaying, which who could have a problem with, until you look at this part. So again, Matthew McConaughey trying to, kind of merge everything together is where it gets sort of problematic, and where Rogan actually makes a really good point. So let me see. I think we're looking at McConaughey talking here, and he says, what if we get with the Hindus and the Muslims and everybody, and you get to bring your best 10? This is where it's like, what are you talking about at this point? He's like, Christianity is bringing us 10 commandments. Let's get together and here, and we'll put them all together. Absolute nonsense. So he says, we'll mix some of yours. My number 8 will be number 9, because yours is going to be number 8. It's absolute nonsense. And we're going to put them up there, and it's going to be a creed, a little constitution to get our day started. Now, his thought process already is that it kind of makes you wonder where he stands. I don't really care. I don't worship celebrities. I don't care about celebrities. But it's interesting from the point of view of, what does he actually think, the stuff God gave is? Because it's so much more than a creed. Like, that's crazy to say, okay, if you believe the God of the Bible, then he is God. So it's crazy to say, let's take some of the stuff that God gave us, the real God, and then just some stuff that these other gods gave, and we'll put it all together as equal. Well, it's not going to lead people to Christianity, obviously, so that would be completely useless. So that's not something, that wouldn't be a Christian view. Yeah, let's get the best, words from all of these people and put them together and squash them up and say, all right, here's the creed of the day. A little bit of this and a little bit of that. That would be crazy. So here was Rogan's response, which, I mean, he's right. He says, it's interesting, but he said it would fail because most religions are ideologically opposed to conflicting religions. He's right. So they're not going to accept what another religion has to say as correct. So yeah, he said they do share a bunch of things, but disagree on other things. Obviously, he mentions like Jesus rising from the dead. So he's right. That's not something that you could do, and neither would it help, because that's not the point of the Ten Commandments. So, I mean, like I said, the Ten Commandments was 10 basic laws for men to live harmoniously with themselves and with God. Honor me as God. That's what the first one is about. Honor me as God. Have no other gods before me. Don't make any images that you might think is a God, things like that. Don't do any of that stuff, God says. And we can live together in harmony, peaceably. You guys will be in harmony with each other and with me. And that was just the foundational 10. Then he had to add more and more and more because people proved that they wouldn't be able to do it. That's pretty much how that went. People proved that they wouldn't be able to do it. So the Ten Commandments is nothing like Sharia law, even if they were enforced, because of American law and the rest of American rules and law. It wouldn't be anything like, okay, if you do dishonor the Sabbath day, all right, you're going to be stoned. It would be no implementation. I mean, you almost couldn't do it. So yeah, Rogan's right. If they did try to make it the law of the land, it would be problematic because how do you enforce? What would the punishment be? For taking God's name in vain, for breaking the Sabbath. We already know punishment for stealing and killing, stuff like that. But for coveting your neighbor's goods, how do you charge me? It's like that movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report, I think is what it's called, where you had the mind police, who arrested you because of something you were about to do. It would kind of be like that. It looks like you're coveting, so buddy, here's a punishment. So you really couldn't do it. But to compare it to Sharia law is crazy. Sharia law is actual law and rule. This is how you are going to live, period. Okay? Or these are the consequences. Now you can say the Jews did live under a system like that, but in Christ we don't. So yeah, it wouldn't be implemented, but liking it to Sharia law is absolutely a crazy thought process. I did think this last part was interesting that Rogan said, kind of gives a shout out to again, it's true. But it's interesting that he notices the truth of it. So in another part of the interview, Rogan appeared to acknowledge the enduring timelessness of the Ten Commandments, asking, are there any in there that don't hold up today? No, I think they're pretty legit. If you think about it, they're pretty legit, and they're 2,000 years old. They kind of nailed it. So he's right as far as that goes. I mean, they are legit. But we know is that they are because they come from God, and that's the thing. They come from God, and that's where the legit part comes from. But I thought this was really interesting because, again, likening the Ten Commandments, and even if they were implemented to Sharia law, it's a stretch. It's crazy. So thought this was an interesting article and a good one for us to start with. All right, so while we're in the school system, I thought this next article would be a good one following that up. It's a little kind of more lighthearted, but it is still an interesting issue because things like this, they touch on stuff like this happens in schools everywhere, but usually people just don't say anything. So look at this. I'll read you the headline. Florida high school shuts down weekly Witchy Wednesdays. Witchy like the witch. Witchy Wednesdays. So again, I thought this was interesting because it's a local thing. Obviously, I'm nowhere near Florida. It's a local thing. But I thought it was interesting because, like I said, things like this happen in schools all across the country. And most people don't know because of how they look at it. It's just silly. It's just fun, which is what I kind of thought, is that it was just something kind of silly, because we always got to consider, as Christians, are we making too much of something that doesn't need to be singled out? But as I read it, I'm like, it's actually a pretty legit, since we're using that word with the last one, it's a pretty legit argument. So this is how it starts. A high school in Florida has shut down a weekly morning announcements segment that critics said promoted witchcraft following a complaint letter from a legal nonprofit. So actually, let me read more. Let me read more of the article to give you a gist of what it is. Because again, starting out, I'm like, it's probably just silly. They just, probably say some silly stuff and that's it. But there's actually a little more to it that I thought was, again, a little bit telling that it's a little more than what it seems. So let's read a little more. Last week, Liberty Counsel sent a letter to the school district in response to reports they received about a regular video segment being held at a high school that promoted witchcraft practices. Now we see that this could be an issue. Not that it isn't just, in general, because there are people who wouldn't want it. I mean, this is a religion. It's not like nobody practices witchcraft. okay, to varying degrees of success. Some people could no more, conjure anything. Then some people may have the ability to interact with demons or whatever. Either way, this is a religion. There are practices. So once I saw this paragraph, I'm like, wait a second, that is problematic. But like I said, even to begin with doing it, you're promoting a religion. Whether you just think it's silly fun or whatever, you're still promoting a religion. But this says it promoted witchcraft practices. Look at some of this. For example, and this is just an example because this is actually promoting witchcraft. In a school, content included celebrating a new moon by this already religious thing. Imagine saying, okay, everybody, which they've already removed from a lot of school, we have to celebrate this Christian holiday or this Jewish holiday or whatever it is. These are witchcraft holidays, things like this. They absolutely are. So having this in a school is crazy because you really are promoting a religion. Okay, you really are dealing with spirits, whether you think it's a game or not. You are dealing with spiritual things. So celebrating the new moon by engaging in assorted releasing rituals as good ways to cleanse and recharge. So I can kind of see stuff like this in school being, you know, seen as fun, seen as silly. Because that's how, again, that's how young people can be. I could see a young person suggesting this. That's how adults can be when they believe they're kind of, being cool, I guess. With young people, it's doing little things like this that might intrigue them during the morning announcements. But it is a religion, which is the thing. These are religious practices. So a good way is to cleanse and recharge as well as casting a spell for enlightenment. So again, I'm sure I could see them doing this in a silly way, but the thing is, when it's a real religion, okay, when it's a real religion, you have to be careful about doing this at all. You just have to be careful about doing it at all. So I think a good call for them to take it down. It reminds me of the Harry Potter hysteria when I was younger. I guess I was a teenager when Harry Potter came out, and a lot of Christians were against it because the book does speak about good witches. Now, I read Harry Potter. I always saw it as being more silly because the spells that they're very silly. I mean, it doesn't. There might be some actual witchcraft in it. I wouldn't know. But I mean, it's mostly just childish stuff. It's mostly just abracadabra. It kills people or something. I mean, it's just like it's very silly. It's very childish. But I always understood why some Christians are like, yeah, no way would my kids ever read those books, stuff like that. But this is almost a different level because it's actually encouraging practices of witchcraft. That's what makes this dangerous and why, my opinion, I think it was a good call. I think it was a good call that whoever sent the letter and that, the Liberty Council, is that what I said? The Liberty Council, that they got involved and said, hey, this isn't equal. Because imagine if we said, okay, everybody, we're going to pray to start today. Now, it was like that from what I never went to school at a time where people prayed to God before school started. But I know it existed at one point in school. But you get rid of that. You can't get rid of that and then say, let's do witch prayers. And say, let's do witch cleansings and stuff. You can't do that because you got rid of Christian prayer. So now you got to get rid of all prayer or have different segments. And I think that's what they said. Give the kids who don't want to be a part of it the chance to opt out. Well, if you know how school announcements work, you can't opt out. It's coming over the PA system. There is no opting out. They're just saying it. So simply it would have to stop. And they did stop it. So good job, Liberty Council. Good job, whoever sent the letter. And my last point would be, if you know something like this is going on at a school where your kids go to, say something. I don't know that you can always have an impact, but you should be trying. If you notice things like this are going on that are occultic, or even if they're promoting another religion, but you can't promote Christ, then you should say something. You should speak out about it and say, hey, if my kid can't openly pray for other kids or whatever it is, and that kid can't openly do spells or whatever, kneel in the middle, whatever it might be, then it's like, okay, if it has to be like that and we have to do everything personally or as people are interested, then make it across the board. So this was a good deal, and it was a good idea for them to get rid of it. And like I said, keep it in mind in case you ever experience anything like that. You might be the one who can get rid of it. All right, so this one I want to start by reading you the headline. of the article. This topic is a little more sensitive, I think. It didn't happen that long ago. If you guys remember the Camp Mystic, where they were flooded, and I think it was a Christian girls' camp, I believe, and there were a lot of people drowned, a lot of kids drowned, and a few adults as well. Um, and so I thought this topic was interesting because it's a Christian. Yeah, it's a Christian camp, so you would imagine that most of the people who go there are Christian. So I hate when there's infighting, I guess, amongst the brethren because the Bible specifically speaks against it and how we're to be an example in the world. We're not supposed to pretend. That's not what the Bible tells us to do. It's supposed to be sincere, that we're not quarreling with each other because we recognize that we have a bigger purpose and we stand for Christ in the world. But anyway, let me read the topic to you, the headline. Camp Mystic, that was the name of the camp. Parents say plans to reopen in 2026 dishonors children who were killed. Now, again, this struck me as an interesting topic because I mean, I don't know how I would feel about it. Obviously, I have children. I don't know how I would feel about it. I don't know if I would view it the same way. But let's read a little bit more of the article, then we'll talk about it. The parents of an 8-year-old girl whose remains have yet to be recovered has to be heartbreaking after catastrophic flash flooding, and continue to pray for these people. It's got to be tough. It's beautiful to see people's faithfulness when things like this happen, but it still has to be very difficult. After flooding killed 25 campers and 2 counselors at Camp Mystic in July, are opposing plans to reopen the camp next year. And let's see, I'll just skim through some more. The July 4 flooding was part of a broader disaster that claimed over 130 lives across central Texas. Okay, then they talk about the system. So that's pretty much the thought process of it. Not too much more I need to read. You get the idea. So some of the parents, and they see one, in the article, I don't know if they mention more, probably so, but found that it would be dishonoring to the ones who were lost, and especially to the ones who still have yet to be found. But even the ones who were found, whatever it is, they say it dishonors the children who were drowned during the flooding to reopen the camp. Now, this is an interesting one because, again, like I said, I don't like Christian against Christian, brother against brother, and I do have children, but I also do understand if these people feel that the camp is a ministry, why they will want to reopen it, why they will want to show faith toward God, or why they will want to show that we're unafraid. I do get that, and I think that is for me, where this article is kind of like, I don't know whose side I'm on. I understand that to rush and do it to the parents could seem like, man, can we at least find the missing children? Can we at least mourn? Can we at least, take a minute to, like I said, just to commemorate, whatever the word, commiserate. I think they're both words. But can I take the time to do that before we go back to this camp or whatever it is? So I get both of them. I'd pray for the situation because, like I said, I still hate to see Christian against Christian. I definitely understand the camp. If they feel what they're doing is a ministry, then you don't just stop the ministry. The thing I thought was interesting about this article in the first place was how, because a lot of people, always say, why God, when tragedy happens to Christians, which is kind of, the rain falls on the just as well as the unjust. I understand it. We can feel like God protects us, and especially when we're doing ministry and we're doing good things, we feel like we are protected. But the one thing I see is we have to take it more seriously when Jesus says, don't tempt God. Now, I know that just reading the article that the man who owned the camp, he also drowned, but that warnings were given to him before this happened. I saw that it wasn't a safe place to be, that at some point a flood could absolutely do this. I think there's a fine line that Christians have to see between faith and tempting God, between I feel God is protecting me because this is what I have to do, and I'm going to do this because God is protecting me. Because that's how the devil tempted Jesus. He said, hey, jump off of here because the Bible says you won't dash your foot against a stone. So you should be all right. Well, the devil does tempt people to tempt God, because God will not be tempted. God is not a puppet who we can control. Jesus says this. He says, don't tempt the Lord your God. We live for God. God doesn't live for us. So there's a line between faith and tempting God that we always have to tread on. I'm not saying this guy, I don't know how close he was to that line, but I do know that he was warned before. So this is a tough one in my opinion, because once again, I don't know. I hate to see the brethren fighting, but I get both sides. I get the sides of the people. Wow, my kid just drowned here. You're going to reopen this camp, and I get the other side where they're saying, this is a ministry. We're not going to stop because we're afraid that something like this is going to happen again. So, thought this was an interesting article. Again, I hate to see it. I hate to see it. Pray for everybody involved. And like I said, we'll see what the outcome on this one turns out to be. All right, so this next article is something that's actually ongoing, so more information will come out. This just happened a few days ago, but I'm sure you heard about it. The shooting at the Michigan church. It was a Mormon church, um, where the guy who they're saying the suspect is a Thomas Jacob Sanford, um, is, I believe they've called him. I don't know. I'll have to read more of the article to see. Oh no, he was killed. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't even read the whole article. I didn't even know that part. So they did kill him. So yeah, so this article, like I said, this kind of just happened. But so the guy who drove into the Mormon church and he killed some people and then he set the place on fire. So let me read a little bit about what they know so far, because like I said, I'm sure more will come in. I don't believe they've even found everybody yet who may have been inside. So this is what they know so far. So at least 4 people were killed and 8 were injured yesterday when a man drove a vehicle through the front doors of a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and opened fire in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. All right, so the officials named him 40-year-old. He exited the vehicle and began firing an assault rifle at parishioners, police said. He was killed at the scene. Um, Authorities said the gunman also set a fire at the church. As many as 3 improvised devices were found at the scene, according to 2 senior U.S. law enforcement authorities. Praised the bravery of churchgoers who shielded children from gunfire in the crowded Sunday service. So I saw recently, like I said, this will be more developing, because I saw that it is believed that it was premeditated, that it was planned out, this specific place. So I've got to find out why. That hasn't been released yet. They don't know why it happened. So as I'm speaking, they may have already figured it out. But as of me doing this, they don't yet know the motive, but they do seem to believe it was premeditated. So let me first say, I know that Mormons hold to a different doctrine. Mormons are not necessarily uh, Christian, from the point of view that they don't just follow the Bible. They have other books that would make them, they're an extra biblical group because of the books they believe Joseph Smith brought to them, the Pearl of Great Price, those books. If you don't know about Mormonism, like I said, you could look up Mormonism. But yeah, they have other teachings and other beliefs that are outside of the Bible. Nonetheless, that I do want to say that though, because I do recognize that. But people on the outside who don't know these things do see them as a branch of Christianity, which leads to my thought process as far as this article goes. Are Christians under attack? Are Christians being singled out? As we know, not long before this, another church was targeted. So, and this happens all the time. So that's the first thing is, are Christians being targeted? Yes. Is this something new? No. And those are the first 2 things I would say. This is not new. Christians have been targeted since the Jews were killing Jesus's disciples, right? Since the Jews killed Jesus, Christians have always been a target, because the God of this world would love to see Christians removed from this world, and he can do whatever he wants. We are the resistance. I love how people say that about governments and stuff like that. We are the resistance because we resist the power of the world. Okay, the prince of the power of the air, the God of this world. We resist him. We are the resistance to evil in the world, to death, and to death being finalized. We are the resistance. So he would love to see us removed. And this is why the church is under attack. And again, not speaking about our Mormons, part of the church. That's not really the point. The point is, absolutely, the church is under attack. Absolutely, people who are seen as Christians are under attack always. And also because Jesus introduced to us an idea that would cause some people to believe Christians are passive. Jesus said, turn the other cheek, give place to wrath, things like that. So because of that, and Jesus said, when Peter decided to stab the guy when they tried to take Jesus, and Jesus said, hey, that's not how we fight. If that's how I wanted to fight, I would have come here with angels and this would be done already. Jesus said, that's not the Father's desire. So nowhere in the Bible do you see Christians being an aggressive bunch. So, from that way of looking at it, Christians might seem like the easier people to pick on because Jesus said, "Give place to it for God's sake." Jesus said, "For God's sake, allow this so that people will see we're not here for this world." However, I did go to this church once, and I thought it was interesting. This was right after I forget which scenario it was, but somebody had gone into a church, and this is a few years back, and killed a bunch of people. And so the next Sunday at the church, the pastor speaking, and he made a statement I thought was very interesting. Now, at the same time, it was, I don't know if comforting is the right word, but it was like, okay, that's a little better. But he spoke about how, let's pray for him, stuff like that. He said, however, we do have many people here who, you know, are armed. So he said it's not something we're worried about because if somebody comes in, he's like, we have several people here who we have trusted to blah, blah, blah. And I thought about it and I'm like, what's the thought about that? It's like, how do you feel about that? I felt okay. Honestly, sitting there, I'm like, that's good to know, because I don't have a concealed carry license and I live in Maryland. There's no open carry. So, West Virginia close to us is, but Maryland is not. You can conceal carry if you can get one of those licenses. But anyway, I don't have one. I don't carry. Um, so it was sort of like, okay, that feels good. If somebody comes in talking nonsense or looking shifty, there are people who are more than willing to take a few shots. And personally, it felt good. But then it's the spiritual implication, like, huh? And I get it. I could never tell them they're wrong because people are targeting Christians, and I don't think it's an issue to defend oneself, and defend everybody. Because the women, children, but men also. You know what I mean? To defend your family. It's no different from somebody broke into my house. I am armed in my house, and absolutely, if somebody tried to break into my house, and my sons too, my sons know how to use weapons as well. I would teach my daughters if they were interested, but my sons know as well. So if somebody does break into the house, it won't end good for them. So I do believe in protecting your family, and as the church, we are a family. But my main thing would be that we never allow something like this to make us afraid. Would be my main point looking at what's going on as more stuff unfolds. We should never allow this to make us cautious in our Christian walk, and in our faith, as absent from the body, present with the Lord. So whether or not God miraculously protect us, so that we again are protected and we survive things like this, or whether or not He allows us to be removed from this place and brought home, will be with Him. So we want to be people who live for Him and don't live in fear of the things that other people might do to us. That should be the thought process that we have and that we live with. That should be the attitude that we live with as we do travel through this world. That's the attitude we want to have. So, and again, and not to be combative. The whole thing is not to, okay, yeah, churches should be armed so that we just go to war with people. Like Peter, Jesus said to Peter when Peter stabs the guy for trying to grab Jesus. Jesus says, if that was my goal to kill everybody, I would have come with angels and we would have just done it that way, and it would have been done 2,000 years ago. But that wasn't his point. That wasn't what he came for. That wasn't what he came to do. It's not what we're here for. So that's why I think it's an interesting topic of discussion, whether or not, Christians should be armed, and exactly how should we. Obviously, we shouldn't go to war at all, period. That's just period. We shouldn't be going to war at all. That's not what we're here for. We're pilgrims traveling through. Which is what a real pilgrim would be. A pilgrim doesn't conquer; they're just moving through, because this isn't their actual home, and they recognize that. But that's what I say. We should never be at war, but even in defending ourselves, I believe we absolutely should defend ourselves. But at the same time, we should be more faithful to God. So that'll be my thought process. Never allow fear to be the guiding factor of anything that we do. Knowing we could trust Him in the end. So no matter what happens, we can trust God. But this article, I'll keep tabs on. You'll probably just see it in the news anyway, what this turns out to, as it continues to develop and as they find motive for what happened. But yes, we're under attack, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have faith in God. Okay, so now something to pray for, stories that you'll never hear in the mainstream news. This one is, again, it's an ongoing thing, and usually when I do things like this, it's something that's happening in another part of the world. It doesn't have to be, but usually it just is. As I'm going through topics, looking at things that pretty much we can only pray for, because unless you can do something else, like I always say, as James says in his epistle, if you can help, help. You might be the answered prayer. But this one is about Syrian Christians, and it says there's a deliberate campaign of terror going on. Syrian Christians facing accelerated cultural erasure. Now in Syria, it's not just the Christians. It says there are other religions as well, or tribes maybe, that are under attack as well. But it says radical jihadis and other extremist groups have carried out brutal mass killings and other human rights violations against Syria's religious minorities. They speak of human rights violations because they're trying to get America involved, prompting calls from religious freedom advocates for the United States to take action. So the article goes on to talk about it. Speaks about how for a while there was a surge in Christianity in Syria. And I think it said so much so that it had gone up to 10% as of, let me see if I can find that part in the article. I don't see it. But yeah, it speaks of how it had gone up to 10%. I forget how long ago that was. But that from that point, okay, it says 2011, Christians in Syria made up about 10%, which is about 2 million of them. And it says today there are fewer than 300,000 Christians remaining in Syria. So absolutely they are being exterminated. So that's something we need to pray for. That's something we need to be praying for the Syrian Christians. One, that they be strengthened by this. We know persecution in years past from the beginning is what made the church grow. That people saw, man, these people believe this so much. Look at what they're doing. Let's listen to them. So let's continue to pray for the Syrian Christians that they don't buckle under this pressure. And also, again, if you can help. If there's anything you can do, absolutely do it. I'm not talking about sending money. I mean, if you know an organization where you can do that, I don't, maybe that's something to do. But I'm very wary against sending money because a lot of people just take your money. A lot of people are deceitful. So mostly we can pray about stuff like this, and that the message of Christ spreads. Even with what's going on, we can pray that God, cause the message to spread even in the face of this. So this is something definitely to petition God about. And again, like I said, as James said, if you can help, if that's something you are able to do. So as always, I like to end these with a scriptural musing, something that you can take with you until we get back together next week. This one will be in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16. Absolutely one of my favorite scriptures in regard to the way we live. So look at these words. Is great. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, circumspectly paying attention to the things going on around you. Huge, huge, huge. Redeeming the time because the days are evil. Redeeming the time is such a huge thing. Different versions say different things. I like redeeming the time because I think of like redeeming a coupon or something, a coupon. You turn it in and you get something back for it, whether you get something off or whatever. So I like the whole redeeming thing because you were given a certain amount of time, make the most of it. That's what I love about this. You were given a certain amount of time, make the most out of the time you were given. Why? Because the days are evil. That's so huge these days because we're so fixated on quick stuff, social media, shorts, TikToks, whatever it is. We're so fixated on these things that we're just hours go by. Hours, and we're all guilty of it. I remember one night I couldn't sleep, so my phone, and I probably looked at the phone for probably 3 hours straight. And then at the end, you're like convicted, and it's like, what did I just do? Now what could I have been doing? I don't know. Everybody was asleep, but at the same time, definitely could have been something more useful than that. So I love this scripture because it is a reminder. Make the most of the time you have. We don't know how much time we have, but we know it's limited. So redeem the time. Use that time so that when you stand before God, he can say you did some good stuff with that time that you had. You don't know how much, you don't know when that time is going to expire. I think of the Pastor Vodi Balcom, who just died recently. And it's like, great preacher, great speaker, 56 years old. You just don't know. You just don't know. So I would say he's one who used his time wisely to speak about God. Even though I thought he was older than that. He's been doing it for a long time, which is great. But that's what we want. We don't know. So redeem the time, make the most of the time because the days are evil. If you're not redeeming the time, then there's the risk that you get caught up in these evil days. So pay attention, walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, making the most of the time that you have, because these days are evil. So this has been another episode of As the Fire Burn Weekly. Hopefully you found something insightful and edifying as you travel on your pilgrimage through this world. I will see you next week.